Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm John Dykes.
And I'm Kevin Graham.
And today we're joined by Sean Fallon. Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind, Sean.
Thanks a lot, guys.
It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today because we spoke about it probably a year and a half ago with Stephen Sullivan, who's very close to yourself and your family, having written your book.
Yep.
And we've finally managed to get you on. So on today of all days, to clinch 8 in a row, we've got one of the family names that reminds us of 9 in a row. What was it like being born into a real Celtic family?
It was fantastic. Tremendous memories at different stages throughout my dad's career with Celtic. The game then was a bit different than it is today, so access into Celtic Park, access to players, the openness and the relationship you would have with players, no social media, so it was a really privileged position to have, and enjoyed every minute of it. Sometimes you wish you could relive some of it now when you're a bit older, a bit more mature, and get different aspects from it, but it was fantastic times.
I've spoken quite a bit with Neely Mockin, who would have been in a similar situation to yourself, where we look at Jock Stein as being this demigod, Sean, but to him it was just his dad's pal, just his dad's work colleague. I mean, how strange is that now, looking back, that you had that kind of access to the likes of Jock Stein?
Yeah, and for myself it was even closer because we lived in Mennock Road in Kings Park, and the Steins, Uncle Jock and Aunt Jean, lived in Southwood Drive, which is just round the corner, literally 2 minutes walk. But there was one story, must have been about 8. Mennock Road's a busy road, when we lived at the bottom of quite a high hill and a steep hill, and I wasn't allowed out on the road on a bicycle, but one of my friends came round, gave me his bike, and I started to cycle up this hill. Got to the stage where it was too steep, so I came off the bike and I pushed it, and I was looking right. It was along Southwood Drive where Uncle Jock lived, and he was out in his garden, and he immediately put his fist up at me, and I just turned round, head down, kept on pushing up as if I hadn't seen him. So I then get up to the top of the hill, turn the bike round, push off, and who comes running out? My own house down the road, but my dad put his 2 fists up in the air, and I put my hands in the brakes, went right over the handlebars. So it was a very close and personal relationship that we had with him. Then other occasions, if Dad and Jock were maybe going to go to see a player, Dad would maybe drop me off to stay with the Steins for a while, because I was very friendly with John Gartland, who was Jock's grandson, and so the two of us maybe played about the house, and the two of them would go and do their stuff, look at a couple of players.
Mm-hmm. So you're speaking about going to look at players. It really was a 24-hour-a-day job, wasn't it, for your dad, for Jock, for Neely? Yeah,
I mean, and it was all cars, up and down to England. Dad came in at all hours of the morning, and then he'd back up again in the morning, go to the park, taking in games. There was no television cameras, really, so it was really having to go and see players live in the flesh. So yeah, it was pretty consistent that they were out all the time looking at players and looking at other games, looking at opposition players as well.
What was your first grasp of what Celtic was?
That's a good one. I suppose being born into it, I don't know if there was any sort of epiphany or eureka moment we thought, this is Celtic. It was just something. I was born just about 9 months after the European Cup, so I was born into it, grew up with it. I suppose when you go to school and you go through the school years, football becomes more of an interest to your classmates, and there'd been instances then where it may maybe resonate a bit closely. But we got a story on that when I went to senior school, Holyrood, and it was a senior school in Aikenhead Road, and there was 2 annex buildings, one for the boys, one for the girls, and we used to go up to the main building for science and for PE because there was a football pitch and a swimming pool. So just started first year, got up with a brand new blazer up to Holyrood, the senior school, and this guy came up to me and he looked really, really rough, and he said, "Me man." I said, "Uh-huh." He said, "You Sean Fallon?" I said, "Uh-huh." He said, "Wee man, if anybody hassles you, you just tell them shall go get them." And I just thought, from being in severe danger of my life, I've got a friend for life, certainly whilst I was at senior school, so that was good. So again, that's just a non-football side of that. So
now, one of the things that really struck me when I was again talking to young Neely Mockin was the normality of running about Celtic Park because it was your dad's workplace. Yeah, I can't fathom that out. I just can't, imagine what that was like. And he speaks about being given a ball when he's waiting on his dad after a game, and probably Neely and Jock and Sean are all having a cup of tea, and he's kicking a ball about and he's using trophies as goalposts. The Coronation Cup used to be a goalpost, Sean.
Yeah.
Now, what's your kind of memories of that normality of Celtic Park and getting the run around there?
Well, I remember Neely's dad trying to teach me how to use my left foot in the gym, which served as a sort of area where you would go at half time for match days. So they used that as a gym, but Neely Senior used to try and get me to use my left foot, but struggled to use my right, let alone my left. And then I remember the gym as well with the medicine balls. And I remember there was a big rope with a ball at the end of it for header practice. Other aspects I remember was the medicine balls. I mean, they just seemed to love medicine balls because they were everywhere. And that was another major aspect of it. I remember the ash going down the pitch before it was AstroTurf and things like that. I remember all the wee three-wheeled cars, like Robin Reliant for the invalids, used to always be behind the goals and used to drive in and out. It's just memories like that were pretty special. Going up to the games, George Stein used to pick myself up. Again, just round the corner, a bit older than me. So George would pick me up, take me to the games. You park in the old school car park, walk up the Kerrydale Street into the main door. The big green metal doors with the Celtic stained glass window up above it. Then you walk through, and on the right hand side it was the office. And I mean, this was like a wee tiny porthole. Mm-hmm. And through that porthole it was the office, and that's where Jock Stein worked. My dad worked. Jim Kennedy worked, who played with my dad and Jock in the 50s. And then Irene McDonald, who was the secretary, all in this absolutely tiny space. And that was where it all happened. And they were involved in everything, like organising trips, players, obviously, tactics, giving out tickets, probably catering, although all sorts of stuff. It just happened in that tiny wee area. It was incredible.
People remind me that we had some of the biggest attendances of our history, and the tickets were being sold out of that wee office. I mean, even the Leeds game, Celtic's allocation was sold out of that wee hatch, wasn't it? Yeah,
it's incredible. I can never remember queues, but I remember the phone going in the house constantly, people looking for tickets, and there'd be different pick-up points all over the city probably.
You've mentioned a few names there. I look back to that era, Sean, and there's a real romanticism about the boot room of your father, Neely Mockin, Jock, Jimmy Steele, Bob Rooney. Could you just tell us a wee bit about the relationship between that group of men?
Yeah, it was tight as they come, and that tightness and togetherness was probably something that the team fed off and realised the success of being a tight-knit unit, and the whole thing just developed from that. But they were in and out the house, each other's house all the time, always talking football, always talking about other players, and that went on even to later years in life. Not long before Jock passed away, he just popped round to the house one Saturday morning to pick up Dad. Well, actually it wasn't arranged, it was just on spec. Drove up to see if Dad would accompany him to the BBC studios to watch an Aberdeen Celtic game. It was to have a look at a goalkeeper for Scotland. John was the Scotland manager at the time, and he wanted Dad's opinion on Jim Leighton. So Sean Jr. managed to get a wee lift up as well. So the three of us went up to the BBC studios on the West End, and it was great. This was the times when there was no live television really. So you're in the studios, you're watching this live, being back from Aberdeen, and Dad and Jock again just bouncing off each other. What do you think about his kicking, etc. And that time, it's just another wee example of the tightness and the way that they relied on and supported each other. It's from Dad joining in the 50s all the way through his career. That happened regularly, which was brilliant.
What was the first game you can remember attending at Celtic Park?
The first one that sticks out in my mind, actually, it's not Celtic Park, it was at Hampden. It was the Celtic Airdrie Cup final, which sadly was Big Billy's last match, but they won it. But my grandfather came over from Sligo and took me to the match. I remember it being a beautiful sunny day. Celtic obviously won it, which was fantastic, and it was just the vibrancy of the green and white hoops, sunny day, and even like the diamond was quite appealing. So I remember all that side of it. So that was like one of the first memories I had. I was born in '68, so I'd be pretty young at the time. I remember another game. It was actually it was here that Dad was in charge of the team for the first couple of months of the season. When Jock came back, probably September, October time, but he recovered from the car crash actually quite quickly, which was great for him. But there was a match. I think it was Whistler Krakow. There's an East German team. Excuse my pronunciation, but I remember I got that afternoon off school to come home and watch the match, which was great. And then in terms of another European match that stands out as a pretty vivid memory was when we played Boa Vista, same season. And I always just remember Alves, who was their speedy winger. They wore gloves, and that stuck with me for life. But so those years, a good few years ago, but they're memories that stick out.
And the Boa Vista game was the first time Celtic, I say the first competitive match we wore the numbers on the jerseys.
I think you're right, Paul, yeah.
Big black numbers with the white patch underneath it. Yeah, the games like the ones you've mentioned there, I was going to ask you about that season, because Celtic, up to a point, even after the new year, were going for 4 different trophies. Yeah. You know, that season, and it seems to capitulate when you look at the end of it. Every player that I've spoken to who was involved in that team, and particularly Andy Lynch, speak with great regret that they weren't able to win a trophy for Sean. I mean, is that something that your dad ever looked back on?
Yeah, probably one of the things that hurt most was that they didn't win anything that season. He would have loved to have brought a trophy home for the fans and just said he'd managed to do it himself. But it was quite a young team. So going from, went on tour, I think, to Ireland, and the likes of young Danny McGreen, Kenny Dalglish, etc. were all on this tour as real youngsters. And obviously Billy had played his last game in the cup final and retired. I think Jinky had left as well. But they could have done with Big Billy for another year, and it was funny, it was just a few years ago. It came up in conversation with Billy, and Dad had always felt that Billy didn't want to stay on, and he felt that the question had been posed to him, would you stay on for another year because of what had happened with Jock, etc. Needed a bit of experience. And but Billy was actually never asked the question, and Dad thought that he had, and he said, no, listen, I've made up my mind. And Billy said, listen, of course I would have come back. If I'd been asked, of course I would have come back and helped Sean. So that could have made a massive difference.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, your dad introduced a lot of young guys that season. When you look at even a very, very young Roy Aitken, made his debut that season.
Yeah, I think Dad had to more or less put Roy in his passport because of his age.
Was he still a schoolboy at that time?
He was still a schoolboy.
Aye.
So down the coast. So yeah, I'm sure Roy was in that East Germany trip on my dad's passport. So it was a young team.
I love speaking to people like yourself. That insight about Big Billy is incredible. I've never heard that. I've never read that anywhere. No. Had he been there just to steady the troops a wee bit?
Yeah.
I mentioned recently about the loss of Billy as a player in 75. First thing that happened was Rangers went and won the treble.
Yeah.
And although there was the interlude of the double in 77, Rangers won the treble again in 78. I think that shows how much a loss Billy was as a player, Sean.
Yeah.
Looking back, you know, did it take a few years for us to try and overcome that?
It would have, I suppose, if you're looking at born leaders. There's very, very few could even try and achieve what Billy would have achieved in that regard. But I suppose a few years later, Andy Lynch, Danny McGreen, you know, they did develop through time. But yeah, I mean, Billy must have left a void, because I mean, you've just had to watch the television or listen to the radio over the last week or two, and players from different generations, different positions, talking about the influence that Billy had just to them as individuals and to the club. So it was enormous presence.
Even Willie Muller, even though Billy was only in Aberdeen for a year, Willie Muller was very full of praise for Big Billy. What was your match day like at Celtic Park with your dad being the assistant manager? What was your...
You didn't really see much of Dad. So as I say, like George Stein would come pick me up and we'd drive up, very nice and early in the main door, and then we'd be in the director's box, the presidential box, and then behind that's what we call the director's box. So myself and George's sister Ray and her husband John Gartland would sit there, and there might be some of the injured players, some of the reserve players round about us. Obviously a great position from a viewing perspective. So you come up, you'd watch the game, lots of people saying hello, you're young Sean, blah blah blah. Seeing some players, meeting some players again, which was fantastic. And then probably just waiting about half an hour to an hour after the game, and then coming home and hopefully with a good result.
And it normally was, wasn't it, back then?
Yeah, it certainly was.
Now we've mentioned Big Billy again. Speaking to any of the Lions, they talk about Sean being the guy that signed them. He signed most of them as young guys. And there was a special relationship and a special bond between the Lions and Sean Fallon. How proud was Sean to see these young fledglings develop into the finest in Europe? Yeah,
that was a massive part of what made him proud and feel he had a successful career. He had a successful playing career, which he was proud of, but he took enormous pleasure from seeing like those young players develop and have successful careers themselves, maybe stay at Celtic all their years like Danny or those who moved on to other things. And it was something that he always took great delight when there was ever any sort of feedback. Sadly it was Dad had passed away, but the recent Kenny documentary thing was BBC.
Yeah.
I mean, even Kenny mentioned that Danny, whenever Danny's spoken about. I mean, it goes through Packy Bora, Paul McStay. I mean, a long time after Dad left the club, there were still players who he had an involvement with, still contributing to Celtic and other clubs. So, no, he took great delight in that. He always said that you used to go and see players, and the trick that he seemed to have a gift for was obviously identifying a good player, but then knowing that they had all the attributes, maybe mental, psychological attributes, to be able to take on board the guidance, the difficult training regimes, dedication. He seems to take a pride in identifying those that could achieve that and then helping them just to along the way to make sure that they gave themselves a great career. But it was not always the most gifted player that would make it to be a full professional. And Dad had a knack of, number one, identifying that, and then number two, making sure that the individual involved did manage to maximise their career.
When I was working on the Quality Street gang, Sean, I spoke to a lot of the guys who didn't quite make it, and there was a sign obviously when your dad had seen them when they were signed up that they had that potential. Your dad explained to me that they took it only so far, they just could not push it that wee bit further, but it broke his heart to tell them that they were being freed. I mean, that shows you the humility. He says to me, it would keep me up at night knowing he was going into Celtic Park the next day to tell a young guy he'd maybe worked with for 3, 4, 5 years, we're having to free you.
Yeah, that was always Dad's job. That was part of his remit, and that was fine. He accepted it, and as you said, Paul, he didn't enjoy it. He did have sleepless nights, but he did it with as much compassion and trying to explore whether or not there was any contingencies that they could put in place to maybe soften the blow. So he had a great friend, Norrie Innes, who was the director with R.J. McLeod and a contracting company. And Norrie was a fantastic friend, played football against that. He was a Clyde player. But Norrie used to do his best. Dad would phone, look, I've got a couple of players that I'm going to have to let go. And is there any opportunities for them at R.J. McLeod? And more often than not, Dad would be able to say to the young boy, look, I have to release you, but I've got a job lined up for you if you need it. And sometimes the boys didn't need that, but it was always good. And he used to always do things as well, like just the compassion and just a wee bit forethought. If any boy was academic and was maybe doing exams at school, he would understand when those exams were, and then he would decide when to fit the face-to-face communication. Look, son, I'm going to have to let you go. And it was only years later, after Dad had left, I was at Holyrood, and Paul Nicholas, it's Charlie's cousin. Paul was a really clever guy, but he was also in Celtic's books, maybe an S form. And he was studying that morning for, I think it was higher economics exam that afternoon. And I saw him and he looked quite upset. I said, "Oh, how you doing, Paul?" "Well, not great. I just got a letter this morning to say he'd been released." And he'd hired that afternoon. And, you know, that's something that, you know, when it was my dad that was doing it, that would never have happened. And so, again, it was just understanding the consequences of such a hammer blow, how to deal with it.
It sounds, a lot of this, what I've heard about your dad, Tommy, Jock, Big Billy of Celtic, there always seemed a bit of humility there.
Yeah.
And we've been told that football was born in 1992 when the Premier League started, and they talk about guys like Arsene Wenger, even Brendan Rodgers, but the way that he treated players and that, that then when you look back on it, you look at Ferguson at Man United, who under Jock, pal of your dad's as well, this has been going on for years. All these guys like Jock, Sean, were trailblazers.
Oh, they were.
And they were people men.
Yeah. And
the humility in football coaching and the personal side of football coaching, for me, comes from people like Sean and Jock.
Do you think that was a working class thing, Sean? Do you think it was a man who knew how to manage other men?
Yeah, I mean, undoubtedly that would have been an aspect of it as well. But again, I think it's just individuals that realised that those players that you mentioned, they were all fantastic players because they made it as professionals, but they all had to work at it. It didn't come naturally to them. They weren't born with the skill of, say, a Cruyff or a Maradona. I'm not saying they didn't work harder, but they were a different type of player. They had to think a wee bit more about the game, and they had to think a wee bit more about life. And I think that would have resonated with them in future careers. Put themselves in the shoes of the individuals that they were dealing with, communicating with, working with. And they just had to think a wee bit more about life in general. And I think that's what's really allowed them to make the massive impact. I mean, so Matt Busby, you know, Bill Shankly as well, you know, don't get me wrong, they were professional footballers, but they would have been the best players or most skillful players in their team at the time. You had to think about it. The Jock as well, you look, my dad said that Jock would use his knees sometimes rather than his foot just to get the ball away. Great knee, but had a great insight positionally. And the same with a lot of really successful managers. Even Mourinho, you know, made a professional, but again, just had to think about it.
One great story I heard, and I'm sure you've heard it a million times, George McCluskey, one of the most sought after young players in Scottish, if not British football at the time. And your father and Jock turned up at his door, and straight away Jock started on George's mum through in the kitchen who was making a pot of soup, and your dad took George's dad out for a pint. So it was a tag team, you know. One of them was working on the mum, one of them was working on the dad, and by the time they left that house that night, George had signed for Celtic. Yeah,
it worked well. They worked well together. But and I saw George at an event a few weeks ago, and he mentioned that story. But Dad wasn't really a big drinker. He loved his cigarettes. Don't get me wrong. He loved his tabs, but he wasn't a big drinker. In fact, that reminds me of his first ever meeting with Charlie Tully when he'd signed for Celtic. He was coming over in the boat, and he had to meet Charlie on the boat. And Dad was teetotal at the time, so Charlie had arranged to meet him in one of the bars in the boat. And because I think the boat in those times, the ferry went all the way into Glasgow, so it was a fair old trip. And Dad met Charlie in the bar, and Charlie had maybe a half and a half. Dad was teetotal, and after the 7th lemonade, his guts, he thought, were just going to explode. So he had to pack it in, but Charlie was still there, right as rain. But yeah, I told that story at the same event to George. I told that story about my dad taking his own dad to the boozer. But listen, George was a phenomenal player. I mean, what a talent! And as you said, Paul, he was very, very sought after. But I suppose if Jock Stein comes chapping at your door, you know, in terms of education, in the football sense of it and life sense of it. The two of them was a pretty formidable duo, so hard to turn down, particularly if you're Celtic minded.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
From the Lions came the great crop of players known as the Quality Street Kids. And again, I was honoured and privileged to speak to your dad for a couple of hours. 2010 it was. Beautiful sunny day on the Great Western Road. And he waxed lyrical about Kenny Dalglish, Danny McGrain. He loved George Conley, Davy Hay, John Gorman and others. Now Danny tells me the story that when they knew that Sean was coming to speak to his mum and dad, the mum was out, scrubbing the close with bleach to make sure it was clean. They had the best china out for a cup of tea and all the rest of it. Your dad had a great skill for ensuring that the parents knew their laddies would be looked after if they came to Celtic.
Yeah.
I mean, is that something that the club lost in a big way? Because when you look at the conveyor belt of young talent, Sean, there is a void after your McStays and your Aikens, Pat Bonner being the final signing, really. After that, there was a big void of young talent, wasn't it there?
There was, but I suppose the game changed. I think life was a bit more simplistic in those days. There weren't the distractions that you would have had as well, so whether or not it would have been the club maybe not focusing in or having somebody to undertake that role, I don't know. All I know is that my dad undertook the role, undertook it to an exceptionally successful level, and I'm massively proud of that, as was Dad, as I touched on earlier. Winning the games, winning the trophies, that was important, but nurturing talent was something that gave him fantastic joy as well. So the fact that he's recognised and acknowledged for that, it's special. And I think Danny, in a recent interview, mentioned that when Dad left, there was that aspect of the club that maybe passed, but from being about the club just now, it's 100% still a very family-orientated club, and they do their best to look after the players, the staff that they have, in a more challenging environment, I would suggest, than when Dad and Jock were there.
Absolutely. I always wonder as well, a few names crop up when you're talking to the various groups of players that were in at the park or Celtic tried to get them. Jim McCalliag was one.
Yeah.
Sean was at his door twice.
Yeah.
Graham Souness was in training. Jim Holton was in training with the Quality Street Kids. Was there anyone that your dad regretted that got away?
Eddie Gray,
right,
was one. Also Ronnie Whelan. He wanted to sign Ronnie Whelan, and he was asked by one of the directors at the time, can you guarantee, I'm trying to think what the word was, can you guarantee this boy is going to be top notch? And he was a young boy, but Dad had played with his dad in Ireland, so there was a bit of an in. And my dad said, look, I can't guarantee that, but I think he's got a fantastic chance. And maybe it was a couple of £100 to sign him, give him to put it in the boy's bank book. And it wasn't authorised. And then Ronnie signed for Liverpool. Wouldn't have been a bad Celtic player to have.
1.5, yeah.
Absolutely. You mentioned before again when your dad left, a fantastic story he told me when he went to Dumbarton. Was it almost like a director of football role that he had there?
Yep.
He tried to sign Johan Cruyff.
That's right.
Tell us a story about that, Sean. That's a cracker.
Well, I remember I got a pair of clogs in the house as a result of it. So he brought clogs back. He just had an idea. I think Johan Cruyff had an investment, maybe in a pig farm or something like that in Spain, and I didn't think it turned out particularly well for him. And I think he'd obviously left Barcelona at that stage, and he was available. So Dad flew over, representing Dumbarton, to talk to him. And it was close. He just, he had quite a forward-thinking chairman at the time. I think his name was Bob Robertson. And I think he was quite forward-thinking. And the deal was percentage of the gate. So we weren't big running heads. None of the other players would have been a great money. So the gate receipts, a big, big share of them could have gone to Johan Cruyff. But I think there was two aspects. I think number one, he didn't fancy the Scottish weather. And I think it was New York Cosmos that came in for him instead. So, I don't know, Dumbarton or New York, what are you going to do?
Boghead on New York.
Yeah.
That's tremendous. I love that story. Again, looking back to the Lisbon Lions Quality Street gang, the Quality Street kids would have been around when you started going to the games yourself.
Yeah.
One of the biggest disappointments from a lot of them, and particularly Paul Wilson used to talk about it, was the fact that he believed that had that team stayed together, they would have been a good shout for a European Cup themselves. Was there a big change after the chairman changed, do you think, Sean, in terms of keeping a group of players together?
Possibly. Sir Robert Kelly, he wouldn't be everybody's cup of tea, but certainly my dad and Jock felt that when he passed, there was a different dynamic, not necessarily a good one, about the club, which is a pity. So it could well be the case, Paul, definitely.
Yeah, because obviously we started accepting the bids. I'm pretty sure there would have been bids for the Lions, Bobby Murdoch, Jimmy Johnson. What was it, 100 grand? And the response was, what game? And we never sold any of the guys really at the peak of their powers. But the next crop of players, we were quite keen to move them on. And that was unfortunate because by the time we get to, let's say, the time when Dalglish leaves, we're no longer that European superpower that we had been. So that was a realisation with Jock and your dad that, that the board maybe didn't have the same ambition. Possibly.
Could well be the case. But, as a member, I think it was when Stephen was writing the book and Dad, he might have covered it or picked up somewhere that there was an example that they'd sold somebody in the 50s as well. Somebody who was doing pretty well. Forgive me for forgetting the name of the player, but you could argue that in a way they'd always been a selling club, and maybe when Jock was there in the height of his powers, that was a change. That was so. It was back to normality perhaps when Jock wasn't there in the position that he was in. So that might have been an aspect of it.
Yeah, because we did sell Willie Fernie to build or erect floodlights, I believe.
Yeah.
He was sold for big money, and Bobby Collins was sold for big money. Paddy Crerand, of course, as well. Paddy Crerand. You mentioned the book there. One of the best Celtic books ever written. I think Kevin and I both agree. And there's been some brilliant Celtic books written. But the name, the Iron Man, on that day that I met your dad, he says, "Do you know why they call me that?" And he put my hand right in against it, because there was still a displaced bone up there on his shoulder. So what was the story behind that nickname? How did he get that?
There was two aspects. Number one, it was just the number of injuries that he'd had. Those days, no subs, and he broke his collarbone in a game, strapped it up, came back on and finished the game. And he just occupied an opposition player rather than do anything brilliant or creative. But there's another aspect of it as well, which I like to believe, that there's an Iron Man in Sligo Bay, and my dad used to always swim from the Iron Man to a place called Rent Point in Sligo. So I go out golfing to Ross's Point every August, and I see the Iron Man there as well, which is another lovely wee memory that I have of my dad. So there's two reasons for the name.
And that Iron Man at Ross's Point, it guides boats into the harbour.
It does.
So it's quite pivotal. But also, when you think about the guidance your dad gave to the young players, it's appropriate, isn't it?
That's lovely. Aye. Absolutely. Paul, really nice.
I think with the book as well, I think it brought your dad to a younger generation.
Yeah.
Who, I know growing up, I was never told about Sean Fallon.
Yeah.
I was told about the Lions, I knew about Jock, I never knew about Sean. It was one of these things that when you were hearing the story, especially my family, Sean was almost not ignored, but if you know what I mean, he was just always there. You got told about Stein, you got told about Billy McNeil, you got told about Jimmy Johnson, but nobody tell you about Sean.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, Dad had been approached a number of times about somebody doing a book, but Stephen Sullivan's a lovely guy. He had worked for Celtic, had interviewed my dad a few times, so there was a relationship already there. So the process was going to be more straightforward and easier for Dad. And Stephen, said, "Look, I'm going to write a book which, it will be nice for the family to have," and that's really what we wanted. The fact it was such a critical success is great for Stephen. The fact they've made a film from it is even better. But we just wanted Dad's life at Celtic sort of down in black and white, and now it's in film as well, which is great.
I know, because when I read the book, I says to my dad, I went, "Why did you never tell me about this guy?" And he went, "He was just Sean. It wasn't anything bad. It was just no, he was just there. It was Sean. That's what he done." And you're like that. The film's fantastic. I
think that was part of the success. Jock was that figurehead. And you had these people working wonders behind the scenes. The film, did it not get aired on the 50th anniversary?
It did.
It did, didn't it?
Which was great timing.
Yeah, tell us a wee bit about the making of that, Sean. That was a fantastic film.
Well, it was Stephen had been approached by Luke Massey, I think it's False Nine's the company, and they they just wanted to make a film of the book. And again with Stephen was great. Every chapter that Stephen wrote, he would send it to me to have a read in advance, just to make sure that there was nothing controversial, because his dad would never court any controversy throughout his life. So we wanted just a nice book, and we wanted to make sure that the film would be the same. And Stephen said, look, the guys I think are going to do something that's very much in keeping with the book, and they did. Mm-hmm. So it was good. A couple of us were interviewed, and some of the interviews, I mean, you know, our interviewees are fantastic, and the one that I really like is the one about Paddy Crerand, because there was always rumours that Paddy left Celtic because of my dad, and Paddy, you know, put me right in that one about 10, 15 years ago. But it was good that, you know, he spoke so warmly about Dad, because I just think Paddy was maybe with Sir Robert Kelly. There was more of a breakdown in the relationship rather than with my dad, because Paddy was just a Celtic man, as was Dad. Each of the other knew that. So Paddy, you know, speaking so fondly of him was good, just for a wider audience to know about that relationship. And Paddy went, got a European Cup winners medal, and, you know, of course, Sir Robert Kelly, my dad and Jock knew that there was a certain Bobby Murdoch who was going to fill the boots in the space that Paddy left, so worked out for everybody.
Mm-hmm. When your father left Celtic, again, we go back to the set-up of the board at that time, Sean. Stephen Sullivan suggested to me, and when you think about it, I think he's right, there's almost a divide and conquer element to that, because Jock was so influential at that club. You had a new guy at the head of the board, and your dad was removed. He was removed from the position that he had been such a success in. Now, as humble and everything else as he was, what kind of disappointment did he have looking back?
Bitterly disappointed, although bitter is not the right word to use, because he was never bitter about it. It was nothing to do with Celtic in his eyes, or a Celtic football club. It was individuals within the club. So there was an element of protection of the family that wasn't Celtic. There was never a cross word said about Celtic. But yeah, as the individuals at the time, because he'd been promised a job for life a couple of times. He was offered the United job when they were like a top half Premiership team. One of the Greek teams, it was either Panathinaikos or Olympiakos, come in for him. And again, no intention of wanting to leave, but told, Sean, no, you don't even have to consider that. You're here for life. And in those days, he didn't have any contracts. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you know, you consider all those aspects, and it wasn't particularly nice. But in terms of the club, you realise 100% it wasn't Celtic, it wasn't the institution. It was just individuals that happened to be there at that moment in time, and they would move on and they'd be replaced by somebody else. Yeah.
One thing I loved, and it wasn't that much long after I had spoken to your father, was the fact that he was asked to unfurl the league flag. Now, leading up to that as a whole family, Sean, I mean, how proud were you?
Incredible. Obviously, I'd been at games for years and years, but for my two children to be there, my sisters, because 20 grandkids now that my mum has. Oh, wow. So we were all there, and we were actually all in Neil Lennon's room after the game. But I was the first of what's the current 8, which is which was incredible. But the timing of that was incredible because Peter Lawwell had called me into his office. There was perhaps going to be a game over in Ireland, but if that wasn't going to work, he said, look, we're going to do something else, Sean, to mark your dad's birthday. And then called me up later and said, your dad's going to unfurl the flag. And it was just incredible. And that was the late July, round about his birthday, which is the 31st. And he passed away the following January, so the timing of it was brilliant. And he remembered it, and he remembered coming off. And he said to me, were they all singing happy birthday to me? Because it was great. So as well as unfurling the flag, they were singing happy birthday to him. And there was a lovely big banner unfurled for him as well. And the grandkids just had no idea, no appreciation. Kevin, you mentioned that they didn't talk about Sean in your household, but you know, for my dad's grandkids and my children, my sister's children, to witness that, I think, gee whiz, God, Papa must have been something special after all. And they went into Neil's office, and he didn't think there was going to be any room in his office. He wondered how many of us were going to keep on coming in. Must have been like a TARDIS. But we've had some great photographs of Neil, and Neil was just so warm. Again, he spoke very warmly with my dad in the film, and you know, he just knows that Dad was a Celtic man, and that ticks a big box for Neil.
Now, it's great to have Sean Fallon back at Celtic, and you've got a new role up at Celtic Park. Sean, you want to tell us a wee bit about that?
Yeah, well, I was never going to be a player, so it's great I'm doing some roles. So I'm currently working with the foundation, Celtic FC Foundation, and I'm loving it. It's brilliant. The work that they do is fantastic. The projects locally and outside Glasgow, you know, the 67 kitchens that we have in Africa, they're nearly all sponsored. They're certainly all built. And the startling fact that I discovered when I joined the foundation was once one of the 67 kitchens is built, it's a joint venture we do with Mary's Meals, but one of their kitchens, it's only £13.90 a year to feed a child. That's for an entire year, £13.90. So the supporters clubs and some individuals have helped out there fantastically well, and we recently relaunched Walfrid's Wish, which is regular giving, £3 a month by text, or you can do standing order direct debit, £3, £5 or £10 a month. But we're redefining Walfrid's Wish to try to, you know, help those, I suppose, who are in poverty. Poverty is, it's not going away, unfortunately, since Brother Walfrid's first was driven to form Celtic Football Club. This idea came about in 1887, so the poverty that he experienced then is still very much on our doorstep. Carlton area is one of the most deprived in Europe. So we just thought, look, the foundation does fantastic work. Walfrid's Wish donations thus far have done some fantastic projects and made a difference in so many different ways, to a variety of good causes. But we felt that it was maybe a good time to realign and focus Walfrid's Wish donations on poverty, trying to alleviate as much poverty on our doorstep and further afield. So it allows the donors to know exactly where they're making a difference, which is great. But no, I'm loving it. It's a great charity, and it's just what Celtic's all about.
It's a great thing for Celtic fans to know that you're there, because obviously your name is in the history books way back to the 1950s. So it's great to have you as part of that. And the last thing for Kevin and I to say is thank you very much for attending today and for being part of the celebrations for 8 in a row that your dad started by unfurling the flag. Thank you very much, Sean.
No, thanks, Paul. Thanks, Kevin. Really
thanks
enjoyed
very
it.
much. Thank you.
A Celtic State of Mind can be found at axom.net. We're sponsored by Fansbet, the betting company by fans for fans.